just so happy you're here.
I am too. I was watching your episode with Leah, and she was saying that you met at the Mother Untitled, and that's where we met too.
You guys. And now we know where I get all my talent.
I also discovered that Neha is married to my best friend's friend from college, Dan.
I actually know someone that he dated.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
Yes. Neha! We're never not talking about you. She's the best.
Yeah.
She's the absolute best. Hi, everybody. It's Daniella Rabbani, your host for the Mom Curious podcast. I'm just so very grateful that you're here and that you're tuning in. I'm here with Sari Imberman, and we were just talking about the theoretical conversation of feeding your picky eating child, and maybe or maybe not projecting your own food stories onto them and to that experience. Totally theoretical. Has nothing to do with me and my life. Not
at all.
This is not autobiographical. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Every question I'm about to ask has nothing to do with me and my children.
Roger that.
And today's opposite day. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
I often ask people who they are today, because I know that you're is it a nutritionist, a pediatric nutritionist?
I'm a dietitian.
What's the difference?
What is the difference? I'm so
okay. Well, there you go.
So there is no credentialing requirement to call yourself a nutritionist. Anybody. Joe Schmo in his mom's basement. Yeah, anybody can call themselves a nutritionist. They don't have to have any training. They don't have to have any licensing, nothing. A dietitian has to complete a dietetic internship. You have to complete a post-bac of science courses. So, like orgo, biochem, food science, all these things. And then soon, I think next year, they're requiring a master's as well. But now it's not required. But I did the master's, but that's not required yet. And then you have to complete a dietetic internship where you're placed in a clinical setting, a community food setting, a food service setting, and one more that I'm missing right now. And then you have to sit for your RD exam, for your registered dietitian exam, and then you are licensed to practice dietetics. You can be hired in a hospital. You can be hired in any kind of healthcare setting. And there's a standard that is maintained. That is
set and maintained.
You have to. So we have to do CPE. We have to do continuing professional ed. I'm going to the Food Nutrition Conference and Expo in Denver next weekend. And there's a lot of, there's going to be a number of RDs presenting on different PEDS things. There are practice groups that, there's a lot of, it is a healthcare. It is a healthcare profession. It is, and this is not necessarily knocking nutritionists. It's
not what you are.
It's just not what I am. But now, although they're trying to it's the credential that they've changed. It used to be RD, registered dietitian. They're now using RDN, registered dietitian nutritionist, because they're like, no. You can't. But honestly, you just have to do your research if you're not working with an RD. If you find that you're looking to hire somebody who calls themselves a nutritionist, just look into what their credentials are. What's their background? Where did they study? What do you know about them? Because you don't have that minimum standard of sort of expectation that's set. But with an RD, you do, or you should.
And I guess for pediatric.
For peds, yeah. I think it's really important. I think it's really important. I think that, and
because we're not experimenting with superfoods here.
Yeah, I think that somebody reached out to me about adaptogens for kids, and I was like, honestly, the science isn't there. I don't have the science, and I'm not gonna experiment on my kids or other kids. You know what I mean? It might be totally safe, but for me, I'm looking at studies. I want to look at things that I can see. Somebody else asked me about garlic honey as a way of which sounds delicious, frankly, but I'm a hot honey. I like a chili oil honey.
I'm a hot honey.
No, but as a illness remedy, a mood boosting kind of a thing. I've not heard of it. I wrote back to them and I said, the science isn't there, but it doesn't seem like it'll hurt to offer, as long as your kid's over 1, you can't do honey under 1, but as long as your kid's over 1, you can offer them a tablespoon of garlic honey if it makes you feel better, but the science isn't there necessarily that, you know, and again, I would feel comfortable saying that's a safe thing to try. I would not feel comfortable necessarily being like, go do adaptogen, go give your kids like mushrooms, you know.
Oh yeah. I actually know someone, I interviewed them yesterday, who gives her kids lion's mane
so
in the morning.
And I don't think there's any real danger. I don't think there's any real concern.
She's a nutritionist.
Or danger. Yeah. I just think that, you know, the science isn't there, so it wouldn't be something that I would necessarily
It's not worth it for
into.
you to
That being said,
suggest it to someone else's kid.
That being said, correct. That being said, I worked when I was getting my master's, I had my peds professor. I shadowed her for a while, and she pulled me in on a case of a kid with epilepsy who was having like major grand mal seizures all the time. And we implemented a ketogenic diet, like a true ketogenic diet, not the keto diet that, you know, lots of people sort of talk about. We were weighing out, he was allowed to have like
butters,
1 slice of turkey, 2 or 3 slices of cucumbers, and then like we would weigh out like mayonnaise, like a huge, plop of mayonnaise.
And how would you get him to eat it? That's what I'm always
really
curious
hard.
about.
It was really hard. He was old enough that we were able to
talk to him about it.
And honestly, he went from having multiple grand mal seizures a week to having almost none. And the thing is, the science is
fat
there.
is really good for your brain.
But they don't know exactly why. The thought is that it's, at least as far as, I don't want to say something incorrect, but as far as I know, there's no definitive like this is why high fat will do that. The thought is that perhaps that the myelin sheaths that coat your neurons are made from lipoprotein, which is fat. So that's part of the thought, that maybe it's contributing to, you know, a smoother neuronal pathway in that way. But it's remarkable. So again, it's one of these things where you can't only lean on science. You have to trust your gut. I mean, the science is there for that, but we don't exactly know why.
Well, you're trusting your gut because this was, even if the science isn't there for the fat around seizures, I mean, you needed to try something. You need to help this kid.
You need to try something. So that's really what it comes from that. So it's really interesting. And working with, I've worked with lots of families with kids on the autism spectrum, and you know, dealing with the different, each idiosyncrasy, you know, each quirk, each kid is going to be a little different. And for some kids, you know, the goal was like, pouches in general are not my favorite, not because the quality of what's in them is usually pretty good, but I have yet to be able to go to a restaurant and order the kale Caesar salad in a pouch. And so it doesn't really teach kids anything about how
chewing.
We eat.
I mean, my daughter actually, because she had such huge adenoids and tonsils, like the chewing is awful. So hard for her. So 2 years ago, she got her adenoids shaved, and she's on a wait list for this month to get her tonsils. And like, I can't wait. Like chewing, her jaw is not strong enough to like really go to for really a carrot.
So in that situation, that's a perfect example of when you lean on things like pouches or like a softer
ice cream. How about ice cream every single day?
Listen, ice cream.
This is hypothetical.
Totally hypothetical. No, but there are certain situations I was working. It's funny because I just ran into this family who, it turns out they were a former client, and then they belonged to our synagogue, and I ran into them at services Friday night services, the other, like a family Shabbat, and we were chatting, and I was asking, and one of her kids was really leaned very heavily on pouches, and our goal was to get him down from, I don't know, I can't remember, but like 10 plus pouches a day and we got him down to like 4 or 5, you know, which is a huge win.
But you supplemented the calories. You didn't just take them away.
So the other problem is that the other struggle, I should say, is something like a pouch or a milk or anything like that. It becomes a crutch, honestly, as much for parents as it is for kids, because you have one job.
Ice cream. Part of the reason why I feed my daughter ice cream every day is because I'm like, if she doesn't have this ice cream, she's gonna die. Like now I don't really feel that way, because I'm like, actually, she's like not that, like she's growing, she's fine. But like, it was so hard for her to eat for so long that I was just like, if she doesn't have these calories, I'm afraid for her.
And I have so many.
And the fear like really created a serious habit.
Yeah.
For
that's
me.
Exactly what happens. That's exactly what happens. It's you have one job. It's to keep your kid alive. That's really hard to do if they're not eating. And so you give them things that you know they'll eat. You give them things that are high calorie, high fat, like ice cream. You give them things, and ice cream is easy to like. You get, you
and
lean
like
on
she has
those
those
things.
huge tonsils. Like it's hard for her to swallow. Like it was just like
so many things.
I have a lot of compassion for myself around it.
As you should.
And her. And I would like to grow out of it.
Yes. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
You do what you have to do in the moment. I was working with a family who, because they really leaned their daughter's on the autism spectrum, and they leaned really heavily on waffles. They leaned just like really, really heavily on waffles and lost a lot of the fruits and veggies and things that, they had been sort of trying to incorporate in different ways. And she wound up with a couple of like micronutrient deficiencies.
Oh,
like legit.
No.
And it became.
How do you even find that out?
Hospitalizations and
thank God. Okay, great.
No, yeah.
Everything's going fine.
It was no. Oh no. You wouldn't know. No, you would know. No. But also that's the thing though. It's not.
But you see that I'm really concerned about this because I'm like, but I'm trying. Anyway,
But
I'm trying. And I do have my mom who's like a real food shover. So
well, that's tricky too. That's a tricky. I end up working with lots of like caregivers, grandparents. I do sessions with them over the course of working with a family, because you need to really address everybody who's involved in feeding, because again, it's about not just when you have a kid, especially when you have a growth concern, but when you have a kid that you're just even a little bit worried about for whatever reason, maybe there's a swallowing issue, maybe there's, for whatever reason, you're extra concerned. You do what you have to do to bridge that gap in the moment. And then it becomes a habit. You lean on it, and it becomes the kind of thing that is really tricky to break. And it's hard to zoom out. Like, is it going to damage anybody if she eats ice cream every day? Absolutely not.
Oh, good.
Like, absolutely not.
Except for my bank account, by the way.
Perhaps.
Like, if I pass by that smoothie guy, what's not smoothie, Mr. Softy.
The Mr. Softy truck? Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
It's like, I'm
they're
$6 in the hole for one kid.
Yeah, they're so expensive now. It's not going to kill anybody if she has ice cream every day. What you want, what it can take away from when you're focused so zoomed in on something like that.
I did get an ice cream maker, and I'm trying to make it better.
Look at you.
So I'm trying to say yes, but put different
things in it. And that's a great way to involve her and get her to try new flavors and use that ice cream as a vehicle for something new, a new flavor. And, that's the idea. It's not about, it is about zooming in on a specific thing that you're trying to solve in the moment. This idea of like, she struggles to swallow, they're not, the growth is a concern, all these things that you need to solve in the moment. And then you really need to zoom out and be like, what kind of a relationship with food do I want to create for my kid?
Because it's like a necessary relationship that's every
day.
And I come from like a compulsive overeating background. Like I was in Overeaters Anonymous. I did the whole 12 steps.
Wow.
Like it was like a real situation, chronic dieting, the whole thing.
Yeah.
I do not want that for her. It's part of the reason why I say yes to ice cream.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, well, if ice cream isn't bad, if it's not a bad food, then at least I've won that battle. It can't be every day.
It can't.
Anyway.
Well, it can't be
all hypothetical.
Everything. All fully hypothetical. But it can't be, sweets can't be, we really want to try to take them off the pedestal as much as possible and make them a little more just like part of what happens, which is why I like that you're doing it, frequently, that there isn't sort of a, okay, well, just, as a special treat, we'll do it. Or, just this one, so, whatever, because we're all, very guilty of doing that kind of a thing around sweets and things like that. And it's the idea of not equating eating with treating yourself. Do you know what I mean? This idea of
I want you to get into that further.
How do you, there's so many ways to treat yourself. Whether it's as an adult taking yourself out just for a manicure or taking a book. And I took myself for a walk yesterday in the afternoon. I really needed it after like 5 days of rain or whatever it was. It was just, I needed to walk, and I took myself out for a walk. I didn't really want to do it, but I knew that I would feel better afterwards. And it was a treat. But I had to, it was something that I chose to do. And I did it. And it's that sort of a thing. And when you think about treating yourself as eating. We connect food and feeling as, even more than they already are. Food and emotion are inextricably linked. The way that we live, we celebrate with food, we mourn with food, we eat when we're bored, we eat. There's food all around us all the time, always. And if we can try to separate all of these aspects of it, this aspect of hunger, actual physical hunger in your body, and how do you fill that? What does your body need in order to be its best self, whether you're a kid and you're growing or you're an adult and you're looking to feel your best? And what does your brain and your sort of taste buds, if you will, want? How can you feel satisfied? Really sort of not just full, but also emotionally satisfied, because we can't, pull those two things apart.
I really appreciate that. Even the sensorial experience of like, do I want it crunchy?
Mm-hmm.
My daughter likes cold.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
Absolutely. Like that is also a component.
It's a huge component
outside of flavor, outside of quantity.
Yep. It's a huge
outside
component.
of color.
Yeah. So you're not going to swap. If we were looking to swap the ice cream, which I'm not saying we need to, but if you were looking to swap the ice cream, you wouldn't be looking at like peanut brittle to swap it for. Right. She likes cold and she likes soft and she likes, so maybe
sweet.
You would sweet. Yeah. So maybe it would even be, and this would not be from a nutrient perspective so much as just from a variety perspective.
Oh.
Maybe it's like a coconut ice cream. Maybe it's, one day you try like a bar. If you always she typically gets, the same sort of soft serve chocolate or the same brand of whatever. Maybe it's branching out and trying something a little different. Maybe
Why?
Because you really want, because you will never like anything if you're not exposed to it. You will never learn to like anything if you're not exposed to it repeatedly. So if I have parents who come to me all the time and say, I want my kids to eat vegetables. And I'm like, okay, well, what vegetables do you offer? And they're like, well, they don't eat any, so I don't offer any. And I'm like, okay, that's the first place we start. They have to be there. They have to see them. Mm-hmm. They have to know that ice cream is not always going to be the exact kind of chocolate that she likes.
Okay.
Or because sometimes maybe you're going to be, I mean, she may not be like this, but there are kids who are really picky eaters and kids who are not that picky, who just, who like what they like. And when you're at a restaurant and you're like, okay, they have ice cream, they have chocolate and vanilla, and they say, okay, I want chocolate, and it's not the chocolate that they're used to. It's hard chocolate instead of soft chocolate or whatever it is. They melt down.
And I know it seems like, oh, that's so not a big deal. We're talking about going out to a restaurant, but really what you're saying is like, this is about emotional regulation.
It's about emotional regulation.
This is about handling disappointment.
Absolutely.
This is about being flexible.
Yep.
Food is an experience at least 3 times a day, usually more for children, 6, 7, if I'm lucky, so it's a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. It's, and also for myself, like sometimes I get really frustrated and I'm like, no, I don't want to. And I don't want to give you the ice cream.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's an opportunity for us both to sit in. Wow, it's been a lot of ice cream for a lot of years. And these tonsils, I can't wait for them to move out of the way.
You have a very legitimate, whenever there is
I have like a physical obstruction.
You literally have something physically blocking you. My son had huge adenoids and huge tonsils too. And when he got them out, it was a game changer. So I feel your pain for sure. But yeah, it is about that idea of like variety, of accepting something that is maybe not the best thing, the thing that they want more than anything, and understanding that they don't have to eat it if they don't want to. They don't even have to try it. They don't have to touch it. It's just going to be there. And if they want it, great. If not, there are other things.
But touching it is, from what I understand from learning from you, and your resources online, thank you so much for them. But like touching them, smelling them, licking them, spitting them out, that all counts.
All of that is awesome.
Even the exposure of it being in the lunchbox.
Absolutely. So I like to talk about like a placemat-sized space effectively in front of your kid. And I count an exposure if it's in that placemat-sized space. So with some kids, I have started with a bowl of the learning. So I do like a love it, like it, learning it. So on the plate, you want to have a love it food, which is something that they'll go for every time.
It's pasta.
Right. It could be pasta, and it's pasta the way that you always serve pasta. So if you have a kid that, loves pasta with butter.
Yeah.
But pasta with red sauce is not something that they accept. Pasta with butter is the love it food. The like it food is, I don't know, maybe fruit or something else that they like. And the learning it food is that same pasta with red sauce on it. And that's the learning it food. Maybe you offer the learning it food, the red sauce on the side next to the pasta, like so they're in the same compartment, so they're kind of touching, but they're not totally mixed in together. Maybe you offer the red sauce in a cup with the pasta next to it, and you offer them the opportunity to dip it if they want. Whatever it is, that learning it food, if on the plate is really too tricky for them to handle in the moment, we'll do it with a bowl. And with some kids, one kid in particular, the bowl would start at the edge of that placemat space, and slowly over the course of 8 weeks or so, we moved that bowl closer and closer until we got the bowl on the plate, and then we were able to lose the bowl, and the learning it food could live on the plate on a partitioned plate. So obviously, like, there's no fraternizing with the enemy. And the learning it food could live on the plate, and he accepted it. And he ultimately was trying a few things at the end of it, but just getting him from a place of real food neophobia, this fear of new food.
Right. And that's gotta be like a portal into whatever else he's afraid of.
Absolutely.
And we want to help him.
Yeah.
We want to help him like adjust to life.
And sometimes
while they're still in our care.
And sometimes it's a feeling of like the parent has pressured at the table. And so the reaction is like anything new on the plate, they know they're going to be forced to try.
Can we talk about that? What do you mean specifically about the parent has pressured?
Body autonomy is number one. That's what we want to be, encouraging our kids to find. This feeling of nobody but your child, nobody but you knows what it feels like to be in your body, right? So if your kid says that they're not hungry, believe them. If your kid says they're hungry, believe them. That does not mean that they've eaten what you feel is enough, that they've even eaten enough. That might mean that they've taken 3 bites of pasta and not a single vegetable or piece of protein, and they're saying that they're full and they're done. And it's so hard as a parent, but you want to trust them and believe them.
It is so hard.
It's so hard.
I've been conditioned out of it by my own family of origin, by society at large, with diet culture, and the need to control another person in our care is so strong, especially when it comes to what we think is healthy.
Yeah. And it's especially hard as a parent of a child, because in so many ways you do know better. You know,
I don't know.
No, but I mean, like, as somebody who has spent
it's true.
however many years living in this world, you know a little bit better than your brand new baby, what they need to survive, right? And it also comes from, and this is not a knock on bottle feeding by any stretch of the imagination, whether it's breast milk formula, any of those things, but with a bottle, you can see how much is in there. And you can see to yourself, oh, they're supposed to have an 8-ounce bottle, so I'm going to keep offering it, even if they don't seem that interested.
Well, it's why breastfeeding can be such a mindfuck for people, because we have no idea what they're eating.
No idea what they're taking. And it's really hard. But I find that parents who, well, no, I don't know about that, but it's a level of trust that you have to just trust that they're taking what they need. And when it's breast milk, it's, what they're getting is good. You don't have to worry about that they're getting the nutrients that their body needs to grow. Once they start eating food, they choose what they eat and what they don't based on what you put in front of them. So if you know you need protein to survive, you need to eat some vegetables so that you're not, micronutrient deficient, you're going to push those things.
I actually only focus on fruits with her because I just don't want to deal with the vegetable conversation.
Right.
My son, on the other hand, is like sauerkraut, salad.
Has he always been that way?
I think that partially because of her adenoids and tonsils, it was always very hard for her. I also think the pandemic and the stress of that and on our family really made it hard to introduce her to foods in a way that was joyful and easeful. Yeah. And when I was introducing foods to my son 2.5 years prior, he was like the only baby. It was so fun. It was like baby-led weaning, and he was always very, he's like this gifted kid who was like born an adult. Like he just like knew stuff
instinctively, like what he
you know.
And that's amazing. And it's a real mind fuck when your second kid is different, whether or not it's who they are and or the circumstances of introducing foods and all these things. I have a client I'm working with right now who struggled with her first, and we started working together because her older one is a picky eater, and we've now sort of shifted and we're working with her for the little one because she's introducing solids and he's having, you know, some sort of allergic. It's unclear. I don't think it's caused by food. You know, there's all these, but it's been tricky. It's been complicated. And she was like, I was really hoping that this one was going to be easier and this one was going to be better.
And it is really hard. Like it's
so hard.
I was listening to you talking about the love it, like it, learn it foods, and I was like, this is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And you know, and if I pull back the lens, parenting is just a lot of work.
Parenting is a lot of work. Yeah. And that's the thing. And I was on I'm in a picky eating dietitian practice group, and we had a parenting expert speak yesterday, and she was saying that there's a huge shame and stigma around parents reaching out for help at being parents. You know, that people don't want to sort of admit that they have questions or they feel like they should be able to do it, that it's just something that should come naturally. And I think that feeding is so interesting in that way, because a lot of people who come to me are either coming because there's a medical concern, you know, there's a growth concern or something like that, or they're coming because things have gotten so stressful at mealtimes. They've just gotten so untenuous where mealtimes are a battlefield. They feel like they're arming up for battle when they go into mealtime, and they're nervous. They're losing foods off of the list. All of these things where it feels very extreme. There are so many parents out there, so many families who have these sort of, I don't want to say smaller, but more sort of woven into the fabric of their own experience with eating and bodies and how they were raised and all of these things that are tricky and hard to navigate, but they don't necessarily maybe feel like, oh, I should reach out and get help with this, until they get to a point where they're like, oh, maybe I, you know, there's something that I could have done here to have a, you know, a mealtime that feels like, oh, I'm not putting like the same 3 foods on the plate. And the reason that people don't do it is that it's just not bad enough to do the hard work.
Yeah,
because parenting is so hard.
It's so hard, and there are other things. What if that same kid has sensory issues and has learning, whatever else? It's expensive. Yes. Like your time's not free.
No, it's expensive. And it's a time and money investment, and it really is. It's a time investment because parents need to. It's not hard long term.
Oh.
We build up a system. No, because you build up a system where the learning at food. I keep raw veggies in my house, and that, you know, my daughter loves cucumbers, my son loves tomatoes. So some nights the learning at food for each of them is just, she gets a tomato, he gets a cucumber. Neither of them loves those things. They're learning both of those things. I'm calling that a win, right? At least there's something that isn't a favorite, isn't a slam dunk, is something that is going to require a little bit of extra thought on their plate, right? Sometimes it'll be, you know, something more involved. Tonight we're doing an orzo dish, and I made it. I know that my son is my picky eater, and I know that he likes the orzo plain. So I've saved some plain, just a little bit plain, and that'll be his love it. Although we might have a dessert with dinner. I don't know what I've planned to do. But I'll have a little bit of it plain. And then there's, you know, it's corn, and it's a really good New York Times recipe. It's like the 3rd time we've made it, and it's a staple now. There's a little bacon in it or pancetta in it. And so I'll save a little bit of those components for him because I know he'll like them individually. And then I'll offer the mixed dish, and that will be the learning it food for him. He probably won't eat it mixed, is my guess. But that's fine because it's on the plate. He'll smell it. It'll be in that sort of sensory sphere, and it'll be his 3rd exposure to it as we continue. Everybody else likes it. We have another thing with lamb. Everybody likes this. I do this like za'atar lamb in a sous vide. It's really good. And we do like naan, and it's delicious. And the 3 of us love it. And Toby's learning it. And eventually it took months, 6 months of us making it regularly. And then finally he was like, Mom, I want to make it as a pizza. And I was like,
cool.
Tell me more. So we took the components. We do like a tzatziki and whatever, and we made it into a little pizza. And he added some cheese on top, and he tried it that way. And he actually ate it, which he didn't love it. It wasn't, he wasn't like, this is amazing. I can't believe I've been ignoring this for so long. And he ate it, but now he tolerates it. Now it, exists in his sphere of food. And it's that not pressuring to try it. So I would offer, it would just be there. The lamb would just be there. He loved the naan. He liked the tzatziki. We do like an Israeli salad with it. He likes all those things. He makes his own dressing for the Israeli salad. Really loves that. Didn't want the lamb. Just kept putting it on the plate and just, stuck it out. And so every time I would offer that meal, I knew he probably wasn't going to get much protein. He'd get a little bit from the tzatziki, but he's not going to eat the lamb. And he'd get a little bit of fat from the dressing on the salad because he likes, I'd make sure it wasn't oil heavy, but it probably wasn't going to be his like highest nutrient intake meal.
Yeah.
And that's okay. For me, it's so much more important that mealtimes aren't a battleground, that he doesn't come into meals feeling like, oh God, like she's going to make me try something,
right,
or I'm going to hate everything on my plate.
Right.
It's this sort of feeling of meals. I try not to talk about the food as much as possible. If there's a question or something, great. But we've started doing like gratitude journals. So we like talk like, we talk through like top 3 things from the day, or anything along those lines. I mean, truly anything else. There were some conversation cards that I came across at one point and I will make them sometimes for clients. I'll literally be like, who's your favorite Paw Patrol character?
Wow.
Like, it doesn't have to be highbrow. It's just a way to engage, because sitting down and eating together is an important part. It's a difficult thing to achieve for families a lot of times, especially when you have parents that are working. But if you can do it, make it count when you're there. Don't make it about the food and what is being eaten. Don't add stress to it where you're like, you have to, come on, like you have to try the lamb. Like, you have to try it. You've eaten all of the other components, or this orzo. You've eaten everything else. You love corn. Yikes. You love it. Why is it not? Why won't you just try that?
Yeah.
But it's taking out that pressure so that it doesn't become a negative experience.
How did you get into this work? Why is it important to you?
I have always been a fat kid my whole life. Like, I'm just like, that's, no matter sort of what body size I am, that's just, it's part of who I am. And it's funny because I was adopted, and it wasn't until I accidentally like tripped and fell into finding my entire birth family.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, and I haven't actually met any of them yet. I just have like tracked everybody down at this point. But I've now seen pictures. I have a full biological sister, and I've seen pictures of my birth mom, and they are big bodied people. Like, that is the body that I'm meant to have to some extent. And yet I spent my whole life being told that something was wrong with my body, that I saw a million doctors because if I was fat, there must have been something wrong.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, I mean, I was diagnosed with PCOS when I was a teenager, at 14 or 15. And so there were some things perhaps underneath there, but it was this feeling of sort of, of never feeling confident as an eater, never feeling like I could enjoy food, and that food didn't...
That you were allowed to enjoy
that I was
food.
allowed to enjoy all these things. And it's not... I'm not knocking my parents. I mean, they are spectacacular people who did absolutely everything.
That was good parenting then.
It was good parenting then.
That
it was.
Worrying was
and
parenting.
They took me to see all of these experts. So I saw a million dietitians in New York City. I saw a dietitian who's now, because I grew up in the city, and I saw somebody who's now on the Today Show. She, all of these people.
And she fat shamed you?
Well, again, it's not, it wasn't like anybody set out to be like, you should feel terrible about yourself because you're fat. But every dietitian I saw, every doctor, it was, okay, how are we going to get you to lose weight? How are we going to, Wassa crackers and Baby Bell cheese? Like, those were the things that were, like, I was told to eat, like, one Wassa cracker.
The Wassa crackers were a big one in the 90s.
Wassa crackers. There were so many. And it was a lot of low fat, which, now we know better about that. But it was a lot of sign of the times. And it was also, I think, being adopted, I think that my parents, my mom in particular, just like, this was not something that she had ever dealt with herself.
Well, she didn't, it's like we don't know what's going on in someone else's body. And we particularly don't know what's going on in someone else's body if we don't like share genetics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or at least I think that could be a total farce to begin with. But like the idea that my daughter doesn't need as much food, I sort of say she's like her grandmother.
Yeah.
But she didn't have that reference point.
Yeah. Yeah. And she did absolutely everything to the best of her ability. I saw all of these incredible specialists and really what I needed was somebody to sit down with my whole family and be like, let's talk about what's going on here underneath things. Like, why are we sneaking food? Why are we, how does it feel when we have limits on things? And how can we acknowledge some of how I was feeling, some of how my parents were feeling too? I'm sure that there were feelings of really feeling out of control. Like they just didn't know what to do with me to some extent, I think. And so I had always sort of, grown up with that, forever. I was a theater major. I studied, I worked in theater after I graduated and then wound up working in a theater PR firm and ended up thinking, okay, well, I'm going to cut my teeth in like real PR, and hated it just so much. It's just not my personality type. And had like a career crisis to some extent. Went and saw a career counselor who we did a bunch of personality tests and all these kinds of different things. And he said to me, and he was about 95 years old at that point, and that was a long time ago at this point. And I remember walking in there and being like, what are you going to tell me about like what I should be doing with my, like, what do you know? I mean, this sort of arrogance of, and he looked at me at the end of it and he said, you want to be in a helping profession. You want to be doing something where you feel like you are helping other people directly, like not, I'm sure you could argue that like publicists are helping people and, but it's this idea of like, I wanted to be helping people directly. And I wanted to be doing something that I felt had a lot of different avenues of opportunity, things that I could, different ways to work in things. So he was like, something like a therapist, like whatever. So I said, okay, great. I hear you, but now what? So I had gained a ton of weight because I was so miserable in my PR job. So I started working with a dietitian. And in our first session, she sat down and she starts telling me sort of basics. And I was like, yeah, nope. Yeah, I know all this. Like I did fat camp as a kid. I did.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. Well, we called it, I went to like a medical weight loss thing at Duke.
Fat camp.
Duke, yeah, well, it's called Duke Diet and Fitness Center, but we used to call it's DFC, so we called it Duke Fat Camp. But it's like it's actually for adults, and they were pioneering like a thing for teens. So I went like right after I graduated from high school. But anyway, so and so I said to her, I was sort of like, yeah, I know all of this, and she was like, you know a lot about this. Would you ever? She knew of my sort of career shift moment. She was like, would you ever consider going into working in this? And my very first response, and I remember exactly where we were sitting, my very first response was, nobody wants a fat dietitian.
Wow.
And the thing is, I think that I believed that in the moment. And I think that a lot of people still do feel that way. I think that there is this sort of like, if you can't get your own shit together, like to look your best or be whatever, look skinny, then why should I be taking advice from you? And it was a lot of, she immediately, of course, she was like, that's not true, da, da, da. And the more research I did, there really is sort of a gap in the field in general of
in all
dietitians
fields.
In all fields.
Fat phobia exists
Everywhere. And there is that real gap in the world of dietetics. So I decided to I started NYU, got my master's. And as I was in it, I got married and I got pregnant. And I started thinking to myself, I really want to be the dietitian that I didn't have as a kid, be the person who can hopefully come at this from a slightly more compassionate, empathetic perspective toward the family and finding something that works for the whole family. Because it is about boundary and limit setting. It is. Like there's always going to have to be boundaries in parenting. And it's about acknowledging kids' feelings, that they know better than anybody else what their body is feeling. And our job is to trust that and hold the boundary that dinner is served when dinner is served. if you choose to eat at dinner time, great. If not, that's totally fine. We'll serve breakfast the next morning, not a bedtime snack, which is where it gets tricky. Yeah, it gets, so it's that holding that boundary in a way that is understanding and empathetic, and also like
parental.
Yeah.
Adult.
And it's hard. And it's so much, again, people come to me thinking I'm going to tell them like, okay, give your kid 5 ounces of steak and, X, Y, and Z.
The weighing and the measuring.
It ends up being, they think about, and again, I get it. My degree is in nutrition science. That's what makes sense. But it's so much more, it's so much squishier than that. It's because it's not just about, and people will ask me all the time, they're like, what will my kid be eating at the end of 8 weeks working with you? And my answer is, I have no idea. I can, however, tell you that, or they'll say to me, can you tell me that my kid will be eating a new vegetable by the end of 8 weeks? And I'm like, absolutely not. I cannot tell you that. However, I can tell you that if, when we've come up with a plan that works for you, if you stick to that plan, you will be offering that new vegetable 5 times more than you used to. You will approach meals with a calmer, more enjoyable attitude. I literally will say to people, especially if they're gearing up for, they're going to offer something out of the box or whatever, I'll be like, whatever you have to do, you have a glass of wine, smoke a joint, take a Xanax, whatever your thing is, whatever, meditate, take a breath, have a mantra that you can if you feel like you're going to lose it, step away from the table. Like when you feel yourself starting to want to bribe, want to be like, we made this just for you. Like, can't you just try one bite? Wow. Like just one bite. Step away.
That's like bullying, isn't it?
It is.
It's the manipulation.
It becomes, and we don't mean it as parents.
No.
We're doing what we feel is best.
Yeah.
But
just like your parents did.
Yeah. Just like all of our parents
did. Just like all those dietitians did.
Like
but we just know better now.
We know better now.
Yeah. Question. Do you feel like this, having been the helper for this long, is it 10 years?
Yeah. So, yeah, just about.
Do you feel like it's healed some parts of your inner child?
Oh yeah, for sure. The shift for me, especially sort of in my relationship with my mom in terms of eating and food, came when kind of when I left for college, but when I really started to own things myself, own what I was feeding myself and eating, because then it became my responsibility, my say, and as I've really gone further and further into this work, I have so much more compassion for myself when I don't like breakfast food, for example. I'm very picky. I'm very particular about breakfast food. I like eggs if they're done exactly the way I like them. If they are done any other way,
You're that kid.
I don't want them.
You throw a fit?
I won't throw a fit, but I won't eat them. Well, it depends on who I'm with. But I won't, I don't love pancakes. I don't love waffles. It's just never been my thing. I love leftovers for breakfast.
Great.
I ate, I ate Thai food for breakfast this morning. And that's my thing. I like giving myself permission to do that, because who cares what you eat for breakfast as long as you are eating something relatively nutritious and balanced and getting some food in your body at a time that works for you. Some people are not. I used to say I wasn't a breakfast person. I wasn't hungry in the morning, and so I would skip breakfast. Part of that was a diet culture thing, thinking, oh, if I take in fewer calories, like if I skip breakfast, then I don't have a choice. I have to wait till lunch because I'm in school. I have to wait until I get to lunch to eat. So I'll just say that I'm not hungry in the morning, but really I'm actually hungry. I'm just going to push past it. But part of it is also that I didn't like breakfast food. And so if somebody had said, what if it's not a typical breakfast food? Like, what would you want to eat in the morning? What's something that you'd be interested in eating? I'd be like, all right, now we can talk. Like, what if we have a little bit of, leftover chicken and broccoli and rice? Like, I would rather have that than a pancake, personally. But like that, it took that sort of thinking outside of that box.
Respecting yourself.
Respecting myself. And it's not that my parents or anybody individually wasn't respecting me as a kid. It's just this changing, view of parenting and kids and trying to make it work for each kid, for each family, trying to find a solution, a system that works. It's not a solution. Find a system, a framework that works where, 3 days a week, 2 days a week, whatever, you have what I call sninner, where it's like at pickup, instead of a snack, you bring a meal. like a dinner, and then you offer a snack at dinner time. Because a lot of times kids are really hungry at the end of the day, at the end of a school day, and they tank up on snacks and then they're not that hungry for dinner.
Yeah.
And so offering something like a Sninner at pickup is a really great way to get good quality sort of nutrients in them in a balanced way when they're hungry. Get them when they're hungry.
So it's consensual.
However, exactly. It's consensual. And yes, however, whatever. And there is definitely like you'll get some weird looks, when you're like at the playground and they have a bento box of like, chicken and broccoli or whatever. And so it's about sort of balancing out, like, what are you offering? Maybe it's not like, a full turkey roast dinner that they're breaking out at the playground. Maybe it's something a little more manageable, but also really owning that and helping parents and then thereby kids own what works for them.
Right.
This is what works for me.
Right.
It started because my kids had swim after school one day, and swim was in Tribeca and school was in the West Village, and we live in Chelsea. It was just like a whole thing. So I would drive them. So I would pick them up in the car and I would give them dinner in the car on the way to swim. And all of a sudden my kid was eating tofu and all these things that he normally wouldn't be interested in. It was because he was hungry.
Yeah.
And it was because he didn't really have another option at that point, And so that was how this came about. And when I sort of, talked about it and we started doing it maybe at the playground, he'd be like, I don't know, people are saying that it's weird. And, and I'd be like, okay, that's fine. It can be weird to them. But we love weird. Like weird as a word is something we embrace wholeheartedly in our family. But even, I was like, it's what works for us. It's what works for you. And that doesn't have anything to do with anybody else. That's
number one. Like what works for you.
Yeah.
I think it's a metaphor for a lot of, I think it's a metaphor for everything.
Everything.
I really do.
And it's so hard to embrace that as a kid, certainly. And then even as an adult.
Well, we're going against the grain because of, as we said, diet culture, even wellness culture at this point. Yeah. But I love your tips.
Thank you.
I'm wondering where we can get more of them, where we can learn more. Maybe there's someone out there who's looking for a session and some support.
So you can find me on Instagram. It's just my name, Sari Imberman, on Instagram, and links to everything is there. I'm also in the process. I've been talking more and more about this sort of, repairing your own relationship with food and breaking that cycle for your kids. And I've been getting so much interest in DMs and all these things that I'm working on. I think I'm going to put together a group, like a group of parents who are struggling with that stuff, who want a space to talk about it, who want, to have some help implementing some of these tools.
Yeah.
And doing it in a way that really works for them and their family. So that is going to be launching soon. There'll be a couple of rounds of it. So depending on when this airs, but I'm going to keep it small. So I'll do a couple, but I'm looking forward to doing that because it'll be my first sort of foray into a group space. I've had a membership and I've had all these things, but having this, I think there's a real value to holding space in a community of people who have questions.
Yes.
And, difficulties. And there shouldn't be any shame again about like looking, needing to reach out for that help, wanting to have that extra sort of boost and support. So that's in the works. But otherwise, you can find me on Instagram and on my website. My business is Fun with Food. I didn't even say that, which is important. That's the point. I want to help people have fun with food.
Amen. Food is fun.
It should be.
You're fun. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening, friends. We'll see you next Tuesday on the Mom Curious podcast. I'm Daniella Rabbani. Hit me up on Instagram. I love getting your DMs and staying in touch. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, as always, for listening to the Mom Curious podcast. My name is Daniella Rabbani. I am your host, and I would love to continue this conversation at Daniella Rabbani on Instagram. And if you'd be so kind to rate and review, share this podcast, I would be just really grateful. Catch you next time, every Tuesday on the Mom Curious podcast. Produced by Hoff Studios. You can find them at Hoff Studios on Instagram as well. All right, have a great day.